He smiled for the camera. Just hours after 4 members of his family were shot dead. A teenage boy in a tuxedo, a white rose on his lapel, string lights glowing softly above him. No blood, no panic, just a perfect prom night grin. What the photograph doesn't show is that his father, stepmother, and 2 young stepsisters were lying dead inside their locked Indiana home, slain in silence. This is the story of Jeffrey Pelley, a 17-year-old from Lakeville, Indiana, a quiet, church-going town where people left their doors unlocked and believed what they saw. In 1989, on the night of his prom, that belief shattered, because his prom didn't end with a kiss or a slow dance. It ended with a quadruple homicide. 13 years later, Jeff would stand trial for the killings, but the questions that surrounded this case never disappeared. If anything, they deepened. Because here's the puzzle: there was no confession, no murder weapon, no forensic evidence, only a shotgun that vanished, a timeline that strains the laws of logic, and a single devastating question Jeff allegedly asked detectives: "If I tell you what happened, would I get the death penalty?" It wasn't a statement, it wasn't proof, but it echoed, and it never stopped echoing. In this episode of Cold Radio, we'll uncover the top 5 most mysterious and disturbing details of what would come to be known as the Prom Night Murders, a case that didn't just shake a small town, it split it in 2. We'll examine a weapon that disappeared without a trace, a timeline so impossibly tight it defies common sense, a prom photo that still haunts investigators to this day, a question so strange it sounds like a whisper from a guilty mind, and a conviction based not on hard proof, but chilling logic. If he didn't do it, then who did? Each of these points is a crack in the surface, and when you press into those cracks, the whole case begins to shift. Because this isn't just a murder case, it's a mirror, showing us the fragility of truth, the reach of doubt, and the darkness that can live behind a teenage smile. At Cold Radio, we don't just tell the story, we dissect it, we question it, and we take you with us into the coldest, most unnerving corners of every case. So let's begin. With the most confounding clue of all, a gun that was seen hanging on the wall hours before the murders, and then, somehow, disappeared forever. Top 1. The vanishing shotgun. They say every gun tells a story, but in this case, the story began when the gun disappeared. Just hours before the murders, a young girl, Jessica Pelley, was getting ready for a sleepover. Nothing felt out of place. The sun was setting over Lakeville, a Saturday night like any other. As she walked through her family home one last time, she passed the wooden gun rack mounted on the wall, a fixture as ordinary in the house as the kitchen table. In that rack sat 2 familiar weapons, a bow and a shotgun. It was something she'd seen countless times, a detail she might not have noticed at all, if not for what happened next. By morning, 4 members of her family were dead, and the shotgun was gone. No shattered glass, no kicked-in doors, no muddy boot prints in the yard. The house was locked from the inside. No neighbors heard a thing. It was as if death had slipped in and vanished without a sound. When investigators arrived, the crime scene was jarringly quiet. Reverend Robert Pelley, Jessica's father, was found shot in the hallway. His wife, Dawn, and her daughters, Janelle and Jolene, had been gunned down in their bedrooms. Close range, execution style, a scene so intimate, it felt personal, and yet the murder weapon, the very thing that could speak to who did this, was nowhere to be found. Only the bow remained in the rack. Police photographs taken that Sunday morning confirmed it. The shotgun, last seen just hours earlier, had vanished. It wasn't under a bed. It wasn't tucked in a closet. It wasn't ditched in a field or a creek. To this day, that weapon has never been recovered. From an investigative standpoint, this isn't just unusual, it's alarming. In most family homicides involving firearms, the patterns are predictable. The gun is left at the scene. Or it's taken and found soon after. Or it's discarded in a panic not far away. But in this case, nothing. And this wasn't a handgun someone could slip into a coat pocket. This was a shotgun. Long, heavy, unwieldy. It had to be physically carried from the scene, yet no one saw a thing. No fingerprints, no fibers, no blood trail, not a single forensic crumb. So we have to ask, if Jeff Pelley committed the murders, how did he make that shotgun disappear into thin air? And here's what makes that question even more haunting. Jeff was reportedly grounded. He was only allowed to attend prom under strict conditions. His available window of time between the last known moment the victims were alive and his arrival at a friend's house was somewhere between 20 to 30 minutes. Yet, in that time, investigators believe he shot 4 people, cleaned himself up, changed clothes, hid or destroyed a full-sized firearm, and made it to prom, looking spotless. No blood on the tuxedo, no gunshot residue reported, no sign of panic, no time to panic. It defies the natural messiness of violence, of reality. There was no stumble, no error, just silence, and a missing gun. So the question deepens. Where did it go? Who had the time and the motive to make it vanish? And if Jeff didn't take it, then who did? This isn't just a hole in the evidence, it's a void in logic, one that no one, not the original investigators, not the prosecution, not even post-conviction reviews, has ever been able to fill. And that's where the unease begins to creep in. Because this isn't just a story about what's missing, it's about what might be hidden. Could someone else have entered the home after Jeff left? Someone who knew what they were doing? Who took the gun to erase a trail? Could Jeff have had help? Or is there something else, something darker, that we've overlooked entirely? In most stories, when a character disappears, the mystery is about where they went. But here, the disappearance becomes a character. This shotgun, its absence, has weight. It haunts every timeline. It taints every theory. It challenges the very idea that Jeff Pelley acted alone, if at all, because when a family is murdered inside a locked home and the murder weapon vanishes without a trace, someone isn't just missing, something is being concealed, and that's only the beginning, because what makes this case so chilling isn't just what disappeared. Top 2. The impossible timeline. Sometimes the most powerful clue isn't what's left behind, it's what doesn't quite fit. The second mystery in this case lies not in bloodstains or fingerprints, but in the clock. Because if Jeff Pelley killed his family, he did it in a window so small, so unbelievably tight, that it challenges logic and bends reality. Let's rewind. It's April the 29th, 1989. In Lakeville, Indiana, the air buzzes with prom night excitement. Teenagers slip into dresses, pin corsages, pose for photos beneath the soft glow of string lights, but just across town, inside the Pelley household, the lights are dimmer, the atmosphere heavier, because earlier that day Jeff had been grounded. Reverend Robert Pelley, strict, methodical, and unyielding, had punished his son for a prior burglary incident. Jeff's sentence: no pre-prom dinner, no after-party, no detours, just prom, and only if his chores were finished. At 4:30 p.m., life in Lakeville looked like any other spring evening. By 5 o'clock, 4 people in that house were dead. And Jeff? By 5:30 p.m., he was smiling at a friend's doorstep, dressed in a tux, ready for prom. According to prosecutors, that 30-minute window was all it took. They say Jeff shot his father in the hallway, then turned the gun on his stepmother Dawn, and then on 2 little girls, Janelle and Jolene, as they lay in their bedrooms. Then, with the clock still ticking, he supposedly showered, cleaned himself, changed clothes, got rid of the shotgun, never found to this day, locked up the house, drove away, and appeared completely composed, on time, spotless, and acting as if nothing had happened. Let's stop right there, because when you break it down minute by minute, this isn't just fast, it's surgical, it's compressed beyond reason. It's a timeline that demands not just precision, but poise under psychological pressure so intense it borders on the impossible. To do all of that, murder, cleanup, disposal, escape, without a single hair out of place, in less than half an hour? Here's what would have had to happen. He would have had to kill 4 people, 2 of them children, some likely resisting, screaming, scrambling to survive. Clean himself completely. Every drop of blood, every trace of powder or evidence. hide or destroy a full-sized shotgun without leaving any clues, lock the house from the inside, exit without being seen, tracked, or heard, and show up minutes later, calm and smiling, as if the house behind him wasn't now a tomb. This isn't just suspicious, it's almost surreal, because according to one witness, Jeff didn't just show up, he looked happy, relaxed, like a teenager on the best night of his life. So now, we slow the tape, we ask, could anyone, even an adult, even a trained killer, really do all that in 30 minutes? And more importantly, would a 17-year-old boy, grounded, angry, impulsive, have had the emotional control to execute such a sequence with perfect timing, zero hesitation, and absolutely no trace? What's being alleged here isn't a burst of rage. It's a masterclass in compartmentalized violence. From an investigative standpoint, this introduces what forensic experts call a compression contradiction. That's when the sequence of events simply takes longer than the time the suspect could have reasonably had. Unless Jeff had help, someone else entered or exited the house undetected, or the timeline itself, anchored by human memory, not hard data, was wrong from the start. And this is where the case begins to fray, because even one mistaken estimate, one neighbor who says, "I think it was 5 o'clock when it was really 4:40, can blow open the timeline. Memory is fragile. Time bends in trauma. The clock is not a witness, it's a narrator, and sometimes it lies. Yet this flimsy window became the cornerstone of the prosecution's case. Not DNA, not a confession. Just the clock. It's no wonder this part of the case sparks the most frustration. You can feel it ripple through the cold radio community, comment after comment, post after post. Viewers running the math, examining the layout of the house, trying to reconcile time with terror. And here's where it gets more disturbing. If Jeff didn't have time to do it, then someone else must have. Before? After? We don't know. But what we do know is that this one variable, the math of murder, reorders everything. It doesn't prove he's innocent, but it punches a hole in the case big enough to question the entire verdict. Because when justice hinges on reasonable doubt, and the only thing holding the theory together is a timeline held together by memory, then that ticking clock, it's not a path to the truth, it's a countdown to a possible mistake. And this isn't the only fracture in the official story, because even if we accept that Jeff did it, committed the murders, got out in time, and made it to prom, there's one thing no one has ever explained. He smiled, he posed, he danced, as if 4 lives hadn't just been erased. Not a bloodstain, not a crime scene, but a photo, a smile, and a question that has haunted investigators for more than 30 years. How could anyone look like that after killing their entire family? If these 2 mysterious details, or anything else in this case, made you pause and think, let us know. A simple like not only supports the channel but also helps share this story with more people, others who are also searching for answers. Do you have a theory? Did something seem off to you? Share your thoughts, or any other detail, in the comments below. Every insight is a piece of the puzzle, and who knows, maybe you will be the one who helps bring us one step closer to the truth. Thank you so much for your support. Now, let's move on to the next mystery. Top 3. The smile at prom. Sometimes the most disturbing evidence doesn't come from the crime scene. It comes from the yearbook. There is one photo that has followed this case like a ghost. If you've seen it, you already know what I mean. If you haven't, prepare yourself. A teenage boy stands beneath a canopy of soft string lights. He's in a tuxedo. His tie is straight. A white rose sits perfectly on his lapel. He's smiling, wide, relaxed, unbothered. That boy is Jeffrey Pelley. And that photo was taken just hours after his father, stepmother, and 2 young stepsisters were shot dead inside their home. Take a breath. Let that sink in. While the rest of Lakeville's seniors laughed, posed, danced beneath the lights of their high school prom, 4 bodies lay inside the Pelley house, silent, still, gone. But Jeff, he was smiling, like nothing had happened, like it was the best night of his life. To many who've followed this case, that single image is the most haunting detail of all, because it doesn't just confuse, it unnerves. That smile, so casual, so pure, doesn't belong in a murder story. And yet, here it is. Center frame, there is no tension in his shoulders, no anxiety in his expression, no blood, no panic, not even the dull fog of trauma behind his eyes. It's not just that Jeff appeared calm, it's that he looked completely untouched. Investigators who spoke with him that night later described his demeanor as normal. His prom date. She noticed nothing strange, no dark mood, no fidgeting, no blank stares. Just Jeff, handsome, charming, perfectly composed. But if prosecutors are correct, then he had murdered his entire family just minutes before. And that's where things begin to fracture, because this isn't a poker face. This isn't a boy putting on a brave front. This is joy. This is lightness. This is a grin that doesn't belong to grief or guilt. And so, we ask the most unsettling question yet. If Jeff killed them, then what kind of person smiles like that? In forensic psychology, there's a term, affect incongruity. It describes an emotional mismatch, a reaction that doesn't align with the reality someone is supposedly experiencing. Grief without tears, terror without trembling, murder, followed by a smile. In some cases, it points to shock. In others, to something much colder, dissociation, narcissism, or psychopathy. And as this photo began circulating, years later resurfacing online and in documentaries, it ignited a firestorm of theories and reactions. Look at the comment sections of any video covering this case and the words appear again and again. Sociopath. He's smiling like he got away with it. This is nightmare fuel. Because we're not just looking at a face. We're confronting an impossibility. A moment where behavior and horror can't coexist, but somehow do. And yet, here's the paradox that cold radio must always consider. What if that smile wasn't chilling because of guilt? What if it's haunting because it was real? What if Jeff didn't know what had happened? What if he walked into prom with his mind clear, his conscience clean, truly believing his family was home, alive, and safe? Then this photo becomes tragedy, not evidence. A cruel snapshot, captured before he learned the truth. A moment of innocence, frozen just before his life unraveled. A smile that would later be weaponized in court, analyzed by strangers, and burned into the collective memory of a grieving town. It forces us to ask a painful question. Are we haunted by this image because of what it is, or because of what we've been told it means? Because the truth is, a smile can't be dusted for fingerprints. It doesn't carry gunshot residue. It proves nothing, but it suggests everything. And once that seed is planted, once we see that grin and attach it to death, we can't unsee it. This is the emotional trap of the Prom Night Murder case. The way behavior eclipsed forensics. The way one photo, one expression, became the centerpiece of a murder trial, without ever stepping into the realm of physical evidence. And even now, decades later, that photo still circulates. It still divides people. Some see a monster. Others see a teenager with no idea what was waiting for him after prom night ended. But one thing is clear. That smile, whatever it meant, wasn't the most damning thing Jeff Pelley ever said. Because during the earliest days of the investigation, behind closed doors, away from cameras, away from tape recorders, Jeff allegedly asked a question, one that would echo through the case and hang over everything that came next. Could a single sentence, spoken in fear, cost someone the rest of their life? Top 4. The question that shouldn't exist. There are some questions that freeze time, not because they hold an answer, but because of what they reveal about the person asking. In the weeks following the murder of the Pelley family, Jeff Pelley sat down with detectives. There were formal interviews, recorded statements, typed notes, but one moment, one exchange was never captured on tape. No microphone, no transcript, just a few spoken words behind closed doors. And according to police, this is what Jeff said. If I tell you what happened, would I get the death penalty? A question, quiet, but seismic. From that moment on, it would follow the case like a shadow. To the prosecution, it wasn't just chilling, it was damning. a whisper of guilt disguised as a hypothetical. Because why would an innocent teenager, just 17, say that? The timing is what makes it feel even stranger. At that point, Jeff hadn't been arrested. No formal charges, no courtroom, no warrant. He was a grieving son, or at least that's what the world still believed. And yet, in a private moment with detectives, he asked the one question you'd expect from someone already cornered. It was never recorded. There is no audio, no video, no corroboration, just the memories of the officers who heard it and the echo of those words. In court, this is called an admission by conduct. Not a confession, but a moment meant to suggest it, a glimpse behind the curtain. And for jurors, moments like this are powerful, even dangerous, because once you hear a question like that, it's hard to unhear it. But here's where the unease sets in. If Jeff truly said it, why didn't he continue? Why didn't he confess? Why not say more? Or deny it altogether? He moved to Florida, got married, had children. For over a decade, he lived like the case was in the past. Yet this single question, allegedly asked and never repeated, became a cornerstone of his prosecution. And no one can say for certain if it was real. So, what are we left with? A question that doesn't quite fit the moment, a memory that exists only in the minds of two detectives, and a boy, then 17, isolated in the wake of unimaginable trauma. It forces us to ask, could this have been fear talking? A panic response from a kid who thought he might be blamed for something he didn't do? Could sarcasm have been misread? Could a nervous slip become something lethal in hindsight? Because in psychology, we know this. Stress distorts language. Guilt isn't the only thing that makes people say strange things. So does fear. So does grief. So does pressure from a room full of authority figures. And yet, this one sentence carried the weight of a weapon. It was used to suggest motive, emotion, guilt, not because it proved anything, but because it could be interpreted as everything. This is what's dangerous in true crime, not the lack of evidence, but the way language fills in the gaps. A smile, a sentence, a single moment behind closed doors, and suddenly, someone's life shifts on the axis of interpretation. Let's be honest. This isn't a smoking gun. It's a ghost, a detail that might mean everything, or absolutely nothing. But in a case with no DNA, no prints, no weapon, this question became a spotlight in a room full of shadows. And so we ask, was it justice, or just the sound of fear, twisted by time? Because if that question, spoken once, off the record, was the strongest indication of guilt, then we have to ask ourselves one last thing. Was that really enough to put someone away for life? Or was it the silence that followed that made it feel so loud? In Part 5, we examine the sentence that did the real damage, the phrase that's still whispered in courtrooms and comment sections. If he didn't do it, then who did? Top 5. The logic that convicted him. In the end, it wasn't a gun that sealed Jeff Pelley's fate. It wasn't a fingerprint. It wasn't blood, or a confession, or even a single witness. It was a sentence, a single line that echoed in the jury room like a drumbeat of finality. A sentence that prosecutors didn't just say aloud, they handed it to the jury like a weapon. If he didn't do it, then who did? At first it sounds simple, logical even, but beneath that logic is something deeply unsettling. Let's unpack it. The jury deliberated for hours. They had no murder weapon, no DNA, no forensic link between Jeff and the crime scene. Just a timeline, a photograph, an unverified quote. And this chilling logic, who else could have done it? Not, here's how we know he did it. Not, this is the evidence that proves it beyond a reasonable doubt. Just, no one else makes sense. This is what some legal analysts call negative logic, a tactic that doesn't prove guilt. It simply removes every other option until the last name standing is the one on trial. And in Jeff's case, the prosecution leaned into this hard. They didn't need to show how the murders were committed. They just had to convince the jury that Jeff was the only one left when the dust settled. They said, Jeff had the motive. He was angry at his father. Jeff had the opportunity. He was home, briefly, alone. Jeff had the behavior. They pointed to the infamous prom smile, the odd question to police, the lack of visible grief. But all of this was circumstantial. It painted a mood, not a murder. And yet, when jurors were later asked why they voted to convict, several repeated the same phrase. If he didn't do it, then who did? That's where this becomes more than troubling. It becomes dangerous, because that isn't justice built on evidence. That's a vacuum of uncertainty being filled with assumption. In the American justice system, we're taught a principle. Guilt must be proven, not assumed. But this case flips that on its head. Here, guilt wasn't proven. It was inferred, because no other suspect stood in the spotlight. It's worth pausing here and imagining yourself in that jury box. You hear the closing arguments. You see the photo. You feel the pressure to give closure to a grieving town. And then someone turns to you and says, "Well, if he didn't do it, who did?" You feel the weight of that question. You feel the silence in the courtroom. And maybe, in that moment, silence feels like proof. That's the quiet tragedy of this part of the story. Because when logic replaces proof, justice becomes a matter of belief, not fact. So we have to ask, if Jeff was truly guilty, why was there no gun? Why was there no physical evidence? Why did it take 13 years to build a case? Why was the most powerful argument not evidence, but a rhetorical question? And perhaps most important of all, what precedent does this set? Because if logic, not evidence, can convict a boy in a tuxedo, then who else might be next? A cousin? A neighbor? A friend in the wrong place at the wrong time? This case makes us confront an uncomfortable truth. Sometimes the scariest part of a crime is not the act itself. It's how quickly we're willing to explain it away, and how easy it is to point to the person who could have done it, even when we don't actually know. But the story isn't over yet, because long after the verdict was read, the questions didn't die. Jeff's defense team didn't stop, and in the years that followed, new motions were filed. New lawyers stepped in, and maybe, just maybe, new pieces began to emerge. What do you think about these 5 mysterious elements? Which one lingers in your mind the most? Share your thoughts or theories in the comments below, before we dive into the collective analysis and explore the major theories behind these mysteries. And if you believe this video deserves to be seen, leave a like and hit subscribe to Cold Radio. That's how you help bring these cold cases one step closer to the light of truth. The puzzle that still echoes. 5 strange pieces. 5 shadows cast over a case that, on paper, was supposed to be solved. And yet, when you lay them out, they don't align. They don't resolve. They echo. We've examined them one by one. The vanished weapon that disappeared from a locked house as if swallowed by the air. The impossible timeline that compresses a quadruple murder into minutes that barely exist. The haunting prom photo. A frozen smile that feels more like a question than a memory. The chilling question, whispered behind closed doors and never captured on tape. And the logic that convicted, not with proof, but with absence. Now we step back, and what we see isn't a picture. It's a puzzle that refuses to be solved, because the more you fit the pieces together, the more the shape begins to shift. The gun was never found, yet the method of murder was declared obvious. The timeline was razor thin, yet it became the spine of the prosecution. The smile became symbolic, but was it truth or projection? And Jeff's alleged question, "Would I get the death penalty?" was never recorded, never corroborated. But it became the ghost in the room. This is what happens when justice is asked to work in the dark. We begin not with certainty, but with shadows. And shadows, as every investigator knows, can lie. When you lay these threads side by side, what emerges isn't a straight line, but a knot, tight, tangled, and deeply unsettling. As investigators, we're trained to look for patterns, motive, escalation, psychological tension. But this case refuses to play by those rules. Each mystery leans on the next, but none stands on its own. This isn't a house built on stone, it's a house built on inference, on impressions, a house built on shadows. So, let's look again at the theories. The first, the one that won in court, Jeffrey Pelley snapped. Grounded, furious, denied his prom night freedom, he lashed out. With his father as the trigger, he eliminated everyone in the home, everyone who could tell the truth. This theory has the allure of simplicity. It fits within our cultural understanding of teenage rage, domestic dysfunction, and suppressed emotion. It aligns with motive. It aligns with opportunity. It explains the coldness of the prom photo, but it breaks under pressure. It asks us to accept that Jeff committed 4 precise executions in a span of 20 to 30 minutes, that he disposed of a shotgun without a trace, cleaned himself to forensic invisibility, and walked out with no signs of panic, remorse, or hesitation. It leans not on evidence, but on behavior. And behavior, especially in trauma, is not always what it seems. Then there's the second theory, the one that speaks of something darker, that someone else, an intruder, a man with a grudge, maybe a secret, entered the home after Jeff left. The house was a parsonage. Bob Pelley was a pastor. He dealt with confessions, secrets, corrections. Is it unthinkable that someone, somewhere, held a vendetta? Some have pointed to disgruntled church members, people who felt wronged, humiliated, or exposed. But this theory, too, has its cracks. No signs of forced entry, no stolen items, no known enemies, just silence. And the third theory, the one whispered in corners, the possibility of a cover-up, that somewhere along the chain, evidence was lost, mishandled, that leads were buried, timelines softened, and that the focus shifted not toward truth, but toward resolution. After all, it took 13 years to file charges, a decade of silence. And when the case was finally built, it was built on sand. A missing gun, an unverifiable quote, and a logic that said, if not him, then who? This makes us wonder, did the justice system bend to belief when the facts weren't enough? Because if Jeff Pelley is innocent, then the real killer has never been caught, never been questioned, never faced a courtroom, and if Jeff Pelley is guilty, then how did he hide so much, so fast, so cleanly? This is the center of the case, not just what happened in that house, but what we're willing to believe happened without seeing it. And that belief carries consequences, because the moment we decide that no one else could have done it is enough to put a person away. We redefine the meaning of proof. We blur the line between fact and fear. So as we close this chapter, there is one truth we can stand on. This case still divides people. It still unsettles, and it still lingers. Because whether you're convinced of Jeff's guilt or haunted by his possible innocence, the questions remain. Where is the gun? How could the murders happen in that narrow sliver of time? Why did it take over a decade to charge him? And how did a prom photo become a symbol of either cold-blooded evil or a tragic misreading of grief? So now we turn to you, because Cold Radio has never just been a storyteller. We're a community of thinkers, of seekers, of people who refuse to let silence have the last word. Drop your theories in the comments, rebuild the timeline, challenge the logic, question the silence. Was Jeff Pelley a calculating killer, or a teenage boy trapped in a nightmare too twisted for fiction? Let's walk this case again, together, because the truth isn't always where we expect it, but it's always worth chasing. This has been Cold Radio, where we don't just tell the story, we ask what still doesn't make sense. Until next time, stay curious, stay critical, and never stop questioning the silence. Long after the last gavel fell, long after the headlines faded, this case didn't go quiet. It echoed, through courtrooms and classrooms, through whispered conversations in Lakeville's diners, through the ache of an empty pew on Sunday morning. In this quiet Indiana town, once known for open doors and neighborly trust, something broke on April 29, 1989. And though the houses still stand, something about the foundation was never the same. A home was emptied, a family erased, and a community left to carry questions with no clean answers. Because the murder on prom night wasn't just a crime, it was a fault line. It split neighbors, it strained belief, it left cracks in the confidence people once had, in their town, in their safety, in the system itself. But beyond all the legal theories and courtroom drama lies a truth so raw It almost disappears beneath the noise. 4 lives were lost. 4 human beings, each with stories unfinished, birthdays they never reached, and futures stolen in an instant. Bob Pelley, pastor, father, a man with both flaws and faith. He was the kind of person who welcomed others in, who tried to parent with principle even when it caused friction. Behind that pulpit voice was someone who, like many fathers, just wanted his son to walk the right path. Dawn Pelley, wife, mother, a quiet anchor in a blended family trying to find balance. Her kindness didn't make headlines, but those who knew her say she held things together. Janelle, 8 years old. Jolene, only 6. 2 little girls who should have grown up chasing fireflies in the backyard, who should have come home from school with glitter on their hands and stories about art class. Instead, they became names on a granite tombstone. 2 children frozen in time, and then there's Jessica, Jessie, the one who wasn't home that night. She was at a friend's house. That single, ordinary choice saved her life, but it didn't spare her from the wreckage. She lost her family, her childhood, her sense of who she was. She didn't just survive the murder, she survived the after, the days when no one knew what to say, the nights when the grief turned to silence, the years when her identity split, fractured, and slowly began to reform. Jessie's journey is one of the few flickers of light in this otherwise devastating story. There was the friend who never stopped searching for her, the cousin who helped her find her voice in writing, the children she later raised, the graves she quietly cared for, the memories she rebuilt, one painful step at a time. Through Jessie, we remember the victims not as case details, but as people, and through her pain, we come to understand the real aftermath of murder. Because a courtroom verdict isn't the end. Sometimes it's just a pause between chapters, and sometimes it takes decades to even begin to understand what was truly lost. Even now, more than 30 years later, this case lingers. It unsettles, it haunts, not just because of the mystery of who did it, but because of what it cost and what it exposed. It forces us to ask, who are we when the evidence is thin, but the desire for closure is thick? Do we believe in guilt because it's proven, or because it's convenient? Can a courtroom decision ever be a substitute for truth, or is it sometimes a mirror of our own need to explain the unexplainable? Tonight, we close the file, but we do not close the book, because the story of the Pelley family isn't just about a murder. It's about memory. It's about the quiet spaces where trauma hides, the empty rooms, the birthdays that never came, the unanswered prayers. It's about the flicker of a prom night photo and the silence that followed, and perhaps most of all, it's about what it means to keep asking, even when the answers stay just out of reach. The echoes of the murder on prom night still move through the halls of Lakeville. They move through court records, through family albums, through voices like yours and mine. They remind us some stories aren't over, they're still unfolding. And it's in the act of remembering, of refusing to forget, that we come closest to justice. So thank you for walking this road with us, and never stop questioning the silence. If this video offered you a new perspective or made you pause and reflect, please hit like to help Cold Radio share this story with more people. What are your thoughts on this case? What part left you questioning the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because every perspective, every theory, could be a vital piece of the truth we're all trying to uncover. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you won't miss any of the cases we'll be opening next. Thank you for joining us, listening, and lending your voice to Cold Radio's pursuit of the truth.